The desert had a way of swallowing men whole. Heat shimmered off the endless flats of sand, distorting the horizon into a cruel mirage. The air was dry as bone, heavy with the metallic sting of iron and dust, and every sound seemed to vanish into silence, as if the land itself refused to carry the cries of the dying dot. It was here, in this graveyard of light and stone, that the warrior man first saw him. At first, he thought it was nothing more than a trick of the sun, a dark shape against the pale glare, hunched low, unmoving. The desert was full of illusions, stumps that looked like beasts, shadows that looked like men. But as he drew closer, the figure sharpened, and his breath tightened in his chest. It was not a shadow. It was a man, a cowboy. The stranger was bound to a rusted iron stake driven deep into the earth, his wrists shackled with chains so tight the flesh around them had swollen and turned raw. His head lolled forward, dark hair matted against his sweat-soaked brow, lips cracked open in a way that spoke of thirst so deep it burned through his veins. His skin was scorched red by the sun, blistered in patches, yet he still breathed. Barely. The warrior reined in his Mustang, the horse snorting against the heat, its flanks quivering. He dismounted slowly, his moccasins sinking into the hot sand, and walked closer. Each step carried the weight of decision. Men did not end up chained in the desert by accident. The closer he came, the more he saw the cruelty. The man's boots had been stripped, leaving his feet burned raw. His hat was gone, exposing his face to the unforgiving sun. His shirt hung in tatters, torn by both rope and heat, and the stench of sweat, blood, and iron clung to him like rot. Around the stake, the sand was disturbed, as if others had been here before. Men who had done this, men who had left him to die. The warrior stopped a few feet away, his shadow falling across the cowboy's broken form. The cowboy stirred, slowly. As though dragged up from the bottom of a deep black river, he raised his head. His eyes, though bloodshot and sunburnt, still carried a stubborn glint, the look of a man who had been broken but refused to bow. His lips moved, cracked and bloodied, and when he spoke, his voice was no stronger than a rasp. "Don't free me." The warrior's brows furrowed. It was the last thing he expected to hear from a dying man. The cowboy coughed, the sound raw and jagged, and his words trembled out like dying embers. "They'll come for you, same as they came for me. You cut these chains, you chain yourself to their hunt." The warrior crouched down, bringing himself level with the man's gaze. He smelled the iron of the shackles, the rot of scorched flesh, the acrid tang of fear in the air. This was no ordinary outlaw left to the mercy of the desert. This was something else. "Who?" the warrior asked, his voice low, steady as stone. The cowboy's throat worked as he swallowed, though his body had little left to give. His eyes darted toward the horizon, where the air wavered like a curtain of heat. His voice was a whisper, yet it carried weight like thunder. "They call themselves the Blood Riders." The warrior narrowed his eyes. He had heard stories spoken in campfires by men too sober to lie. Riders who hunted not for justice or bounty, but for pleasure. Men who chained others in the desert to suffer, their deaths drawn out like some cruel game. Mercenaries, ghosts of the frontier, their names whispered in towns where law had no hold. And this cowboy, whoever he was, had been one of their chosen prey. The warrior looked down at the chains, the rusted metal biting deep. His instincts burned with conflict. To walk away would mean leaving the man to die bound, helpless, forgotten. To cut him loose meant stepping into the crosshairs of a hunt no sane man wished to join. But in his people's way, there was no question. Chains were an abomination. A man should die free under sky and wind, not tethered like cattle to a stake. The cowboy's eyes begged him in silence, whether to leave or to free him. It was unclear. The warrior reached for the knife strapped to his side. The sun glared overhead. A buzzard cut slow circles above. As if waiting for the decision, the warrior gripped the shackle with one hand, the knife in the other. Steel scraped iron, sending sparks into the dry air. And in that moment, before the chain broke, before the hunt began, the desert held its breath. The knife's edge bit against the iron, scraping sparks that fizzled in the desert heat. The sound was harsh, sharp enough to make the Mustang stamp its hooves uneasily, tossing its black mane in irritation. The warrior pressed harder, his muscles taut beneath the weight of sun and decision. The cowboy stirred again, his breath rattling in his chest. "I told you," he croaked, his voice almost lost to the dry wind. "You don't understand. They'll kill you too. They'll hunt us. Both. That's all they live for." The warrior glanced up, his dark eyes unreadable. Sweat beaded along his brow, sliding down the line of his cheek, catching in the shadow of his jaw. His long black hair stuck to his shoulders where the desert heat had pressed it flat with sweat. He was Comanche, and though words were few on his tongue, his heart was heavy with the weight of choices that would not leave him. He had seen cruelty before. White soldiers burning villages, ranch lords whipping drifters until their backs split open, even men of his own people punished in shameful ways. But this was something that cut deeper. Chains. A man shackled like an animal, left to be eaten by sun and buzzards. To the warrior, it was worse than death itself. His knife slipped against the metal, ringing out a sharp note. The cowboy flinched. "Don't," he whispered. "You ain't saving me. You're damning yourself." The warrior leaned close, his voice low, steady as the desert wind. "A man should not die in chains." The cowboy's eyes searched his face, wild with fear and exhaustion. "You don't get it. The blood riders." His words faltered as he coughed, the effort wrenching his body until he nearly collapsed against the stake. The warrior caught him with one arm, steadying him before he struck the ground. His skin was blistered, burning hot beneath the touch, yet beneath the weakness was a frame that had once been strong, broad shoulders, calloused hands, the marks of a man who had worked cattle, ridden miles, and fought to survive. The cowboy blinked up at him as if seeing him clearly for the first time. His gaze fixed on the necklace around the warrior's neck, a bone-carved charm, polished smooth from years of wear. "You ain't white," he whispered, his voice trembling. "You're one of them, the people the riders hate most." The warrior's knife pressed against the chain again, sparks dancing like fireflies in the dying light. "Why?" The cowboy rasped. "Why help me?" The warrior said nothing at first. He thought of his father, who had once told him, "If you walk away from a man in chains, you chain yourself to the shame of it forever." He thought of his mother, who had sung to him under the wide sky, telling him the spirits of the land watched how men treated one another. And he thought of the iron itself, the way it looked against flesh, cruel and unnatural. Finally, he spoke. "Because I will not leave you for the buzzards." The cowboy's chest heaved. His cracked lips tried to form a protest, but no more words came. His strength had run out. The warrior shifted, gripping the chain with both hands. He wedged the knife's edge deep into the link, twisting until his muscles strained, veins standing out like cords along his arms. At last, with a jarring crack, the shackle gave way. The cowboy sagged forward, collapsing into the warrior's arms, his body shaking with exhaustion. The warrior lowered him gently to the sand, propping him against the Mustang's flank. The horse nickered low, as if uneasy with the weight of a dying man leaning on it. For a moment, the desert seemed to breathe again. The silence stretched wide, the only sound the cowboy's shallow breaths and the faint clink of broken chains. But then faint and distant, the warrior heard something. Else.hoshbats. At first, it was just a whisper in the wind, easy to mistake for the groan of shifting earth. But as he tilted his head, listening with the sharpness of a hunter, the sound grew clearer. Steady, relentless, the pounding of hooves moving in unison. Dust was rising on the far horizon, faint but undeniable. The cowboy stirred, lifting his head with great effort. His cracked voice held terror that no chains could forge. "They're coming," he whispered. "The Blood Riders. They never leave a man free." "You shouldn't have cut me loose." The warrior's eyes hardened. He slid the knife back into its sheath, his jaw tightening as the first smudge of riders became visible against the burning horizon. Black coats. Lean horses, men riding like wolves in a pack. The choice had been made by freeing the cowboy. He had set something into motion, a hunt that would not stop until blood was spilled, and the desert, watching in silence, knew the first drop would fall soon. The chain snapped with a sound like a rifle shot. For a moment, the desert seemed to echo with it, carrying the sharp metallic crack far across the empty flats. The warrior froze, his hand still gripping the broken shackle, his chest heaving with the effort it had taken to split the iron. In that heartbeat of silence, he wondered if the sound had carried to the riders, if it was the signal they were waiting for. The cowboy sagged forward, weightless as cloth. His wrists were torn raw where the shackles had bitten, blood dried in dark lines down his forearms. The sudden freedom seemed to rob him of what little strength he had left. His knees buckled beneath him, and he crumpled into the warrior's arms, limp as a man already dead. But he was breathing. Shallow, ragged, but breathing. The warrior hooked one arm under the cowboy's shoulders, steadying him. "Up," he said firmly, though his voice carried no anger. It was the voice of someone commanding life itself to stay a little longer. Cowboy's eyes fluttered open, dull and glassy, but behind the haze there still glimmered a stubborn flame. His lips parted, words dragging out of him like stones pulled from the bottom of a river. "You shouldn't have done it." The warrior lifted him, setting him against the flank of the Mustang. The horse shifted uneasily, but held steady. As the warrior tied the broken chain around the saddle horn, letting the metal clink softly. His people believed broken things carried power, and he intended to keep it close. On the horizon, the dust cloud grew. The Blood Riders were no longer whispers in the distance. They were coming fast. The warrior bent to cut the remaining shackles from the cowboy's ankles. Each stroke of his knife scraped fire from the iron. The cowboy groaned, his whole body trembling with the effort of holding still. When the final link gave way, he slumped against the saddle, too weak to even stand. "Why?" The cowboy rasped, his voice breaking. "Why risk yourself for me?" The warrior looked at him, the shadow of his long hair falling across his face. He thought of the lessons his father had taught him, of the shame of leaving a man bound, of the spirits watching from the wind. He thought of the way the cowboy's eyes had carried the weight of one who had seen death too close and had not yet surrendered. Instead of answering, the warrior lifted the cowboy onto the Mustang's back. The man groaned as the movement reopened blisters and sores, but he clung weakly to the saddle horn. When the warrior mounted behind him, the Mustang snorted, muscles tensing, as if it too sensed the storm rising behind them. The cowboy's head lolled back against the warrior's chest. His words came in a whisper, but every syllable carried iron. "They'll never stop now. You broke their game. They'll hunt us to the last breath." The warrior's jaw tightened. He scanned the horizon. The Blood Riders were clearer, now dark shapes against the fiery sky, their horses running low and hard, moving in unison like wolves on the hunt. Black coats snapped in the wind. Rifles glinted in the dying light. The desert seemed to hold its breath again. The warrior shifted in the saddle, gripping the reins. The mustang pawed at the ground, eager, restless, as though it too knew the stakes. "You ride with me now," the warrior said. His voice was low, calm, as steady as stone. "We face them together." The cowboy coughed, his throat raw, but there was a glimmer of a smile in the corner of his cracked lips. A smile not of joy, but of grim defiance. "Together," he rasped out behind. Then the thunder of hooves grew louder. Dust rose in a cloud, carrying with it the smell of gunpowder and sweat. The warrior dug his heels into the mustang's flanks. The horse surged forward, sand flying in its wake. They rode hard, the desert stretching out before them like an ocean of fire and bone. Wind whipped the warrior's hair against his face. The cowboy clung to him, trembling but alive every breath. A battle. Shots rang out, sharp and deadly, the sound tearing through the desert air. Bullets kicked up sand around them, slicing the silence with violence. The riders had closed the distance enough to fire. The warrior leaned low over the mustang's neck, urging it faster. The canyon lay ahead, jagged cliffs rising like teeth against the blood-red horizon. Shelter, maybe, or a trap. But the open desert offered no hope. Behind them, the riders howled a sound not of men, but of beasts tasting blood. The cowboy twisted weakly in the saddle, lifting his head just enough to look back. His voice cracked, carrying both dread and dark humor. "You freed me. Now you freed the hunt." The warrior didn't answer. His eyes burned ahead, fixed on the canyon's shadow. Chains had been broken. But in their place, something far more dangerous had been unleashed. The canyon loomed closer with every pounding stride of the mustang. She ran like a creature born of wind and fire, her muscles straining, hooves drumming the earth like war drums. Yet behind her, the thunder of many horses only grew louder, rolling. Across the desert like a storm that could not be outrun, the cowboy clung weakly to the saddle horn, his breath rasping, every jolt sending fire through his wounds. His voice was barely a whisper against the roar of pursuit. "You don't know what's behind us. You don't know what you set loose." The warrior didn't answer. His eyes were sharp on the canyon's jagged maw, calculating paths and shadows. But even without looking back, he could feel the riders gaining. The earth itself seemed to shake beneath their fury. A rifle cracked. A bullet hissed past his ear and struck stone ahead, shattering it into sparks and shards. The warrior ducked. Low, pressing the mustang harder, weaving through ridges and outcrops as gunfire snapped around them. The cowboy lifted his head weakly, forcing his eyes open despite the sting of sweat and blood. He saw them dark shapes cutting across the horizon, black-coated men riding lean horses bred for endurance, their faces hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats. Dust cloaked them, but the glint of rifles shone through like fireflies in the dusk. "The blood riders," he rasped. "Mercenaries, devils on horseback, paid by cattle barons and mining kings to scour the land. But gold ain't what keeps them riding. It's the killing, the hunt. That's their true wage." The warrior's jaw tightened. He had heard whispers before, stories told in towns too frightened to say the names aloud. Men chained to stakes, left to the desert until thirst or vultures took them. Families driven from land and hunted down like deer. No lawman dared stop them. Number sheriff could touch them. They were vultures dressed as men, carrion that fed on suffering. Another bullet screamed past, close enough to scorch the air against his cheek. The cowboy coughed, his whole body racked with the force. Blood flecked his lips, but his voice carried an edge of grim truth. They don't just kill. They play. Break a man's spirit first, strip him down, make him beg for death. I was their game, and now you are too. The warrior shifted in the saddle, adjusting his grip on the reins. His eyes were hard as flint. He did not speak, but inside, a fire burned a cold. Steady rage that did not flare outward but burned hotter with every hoofbeat. The canyon walls rose closer now, jagged cliffs catching the last red light of the sinking sun. Shadows deepened, stretching long fingers across the sand. The warrior guided the Mustang toward the narrowest cut where stone teeth jutted up from the earth. He knew the riders would follow, but inside the canyon, numbers would matter less. The land itself could fight on his side. Behind them, the blood. Riders howled a chilling sound, half laugh, half animal cry. It echoed across the desert, carrying the certainty of death with it. The cowboy shivered at the sound. You don't know them. You don't know the games they'll play. I seen him chain a man, then ride circles round him till he went mad. I seen him take boys, hang him from their saddles like trophies. His voice broke, low with shame. I was next. Till you cut me free. The warrior said nothing, but his hand brushed the broken chain tied to the saddle horn. He had made his choice. He would not turn back. The Mustang plunged into the canyon's mouth, hooves clattering on stone. The air cooled suddenly, shadows swallowing them whole. The walls rose high on either side, close enough for sound to echo. Behind them, the riders followed, their laughter and shouts bouncing off the cliffs until it seemed the canyon itself hunted them. The warrior's senses sharpened. Every hoofbeat echoed double, every breath magnified. The cowboy sagged against him, whispering prayers he barely had strength to finish. The riders slowed as they entered, spreading out like wolves circling prey. Their torches lit the canyon walls with wild dancing light, and the glow revealed their faces at last weathered men with eyes as empty as grave dirt, grins wide and hungry. Some bore scars, others beads and trinkets torn from their victims. One man carried a necklace strung with human teeth. The cowboy's eyes widened with dread. That one, he gasped, pointing weakly. That's their leader. Calls himself Crow. Ain't his real name, but it's the one folks whisper. Crow don't stop once he picks his prey. He'll chase us to the ends of the earth. The warrior locked eyes with the man called Crow. Even in the flicker of torchlight, he saw the cold gleam of a predator who had never known defeat. The canyon closed around them. There would be no escape without a fight, and the hunt, the true hunt, had only just begun. The Mustang's hooves struck sparks against the canyon floor as she thundered forward, her nostrils flaring, muscles rippling beneath the warrior's weight. Every stride echoed like gunfire, bouncing from wall to wall until the sound became a deafening roar. Behind them, the blood riders poured into the canyon like a flood, their torches casting long, jagged shadows across the stone. The flames lit their faces scarred, grinning, eyes glinting with the fever of the hunt. Their laughter rose, a chilling chorus that seemed to close in from every side. The cowboy groaned, his body trembling against the warrior's chest. His head lolled, but his eyes were open, staring wild into the dark. They're toying with us, he rasped. Always do. Don't matter how fast we ride. They'll stretch it out. They like to watch a man break. A rifle cracked, the blast ricocheting through the canyon like thunder. A chunk of stone exploded just inches from the Mustang's flank, showering them with sharp fragments. The horse screamed, rearing sideways, but the warrior held tight, steadying her with firm hands and quiet strength. The cowboy's grip slipped from the saddle horn. The warrior shifted, one strong arm circling his waist to keep him steady. He felt how light the man had become, the heat of fever burning through his tattered shirt. The cowboy was fading, but still he whispered, his voice raw with both fear and defiance. You should have left me. The warrior's dark eyes flashed in the torchlight. His voice came low, steady, like the stone walls surrounding them. Man does not leave another in chains. The cowboy swallowed, his throat working painfully. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the pounding of hooves and the shouts of riders behind. Then, with a weak, bitter laugh, the cowboy muttered, "Then you're chained to me now, 'cause they'll never stop." The warrior didn't answer. His focus was ahead, searching the canyon walls for an opening, a way to lose the pack. But the canyon twisted and narrowed, its sheer walls rising higher until escape seemed impossible. More shouts rang out. Sparks lit the shadows where bullets struck stone. The warrior urged the mustang faster, her breath coming in sharp snorts, foam flecking her mouth. She veered toward a side path, a narrow crack in the canyon wall barely wide enough for a horse. "Hold!" The warrior whispered to her in his native tongue, pressing his knees against her flanks. The mustang obeyed, darting into the cleft just as another bullet screamed past, close enough to tear a line across the warrior's shoulder. Blood welled, hot trickling down his chest, but he gritted his teeth and pushed forward. The side path was steep, littered with loose rock. The mustang scrambled upward, her hooves slipping on shale, sending pebbles rattling down the slope. Behind, the riders slowed, their torches flickering as they clustered at the canyon mouth, shouting curses into the dark. A few fired blind shots, the reports echoing endlessly, but none found their mark. The warrior urged his horse higher, until at last the path leveled out onto a shelf of stone overlooking the canyon. From there, he could see the riders below, their torches swirling like fireflies in the abyss, their voices rising in frustration. The cowboy stirred weakly, lifting his head just enough to see. His cracked lips pulled into a grim smile. "They'll find the trail. Crow don't lose prey. Not ever." The warrior pressed a hand against his bleeding shoulder, his dark gaze fixed on the riders below. Their leader, Crow, sat astride a massive black stallion, torchlight dancing across his gaunt face. Even from this distance, the warrior could see his cold grin, could feel the weight of his eyes searching the shadows. The warrior turned his horse away from the edge. He knew the cowboy was right. The blood riders wouldn't give up, not until the earth itself swallowed them. The shelf stretched into the open desert again, a wasteland of stone and sand under a sky burning with stars. The warrior guided the mustang forward, each stride carrying them farther from the canyon's trap and deeper into the endless dark. The cowboy sagged against him, his breath shallow, his words barely more than a whisper. "What's your name?" "Warrior?" The warrior's voice was quiet, almost lost to the wind. "Dakota." The cowboy nodded faintly, his eyes closing. "Name's Colton. Reckon I owe you my life." Dakota didn't answer. His eyes stayed on the horizon, where the desert stretched wide and merciless. The riders would come. He knew it as surely as he knew his own heartbeat. But for now, under the cold sweep of stars, one thing was certain: he had cut the chains. And he would see this through, no matter the cost. Behind them, faint but growing louder, the howls of the blood riders rolled into the night. The hunt was far from over. The desert night had teeth. Wind howled through the gullies and rattled mesquite branches like bones strung on a gambler's necklace. Coyotes sang in broken harmony, their yips and howls weaving with the crackle of the campfire where Eli and Coda sat. Neither spoke for a long while. Their silence was not born of comfort but of dread. Each man could hear the phantom. Footsteps of pursuers, even in the hush. Koda poked the fire with a charred stick, eyes reflecting orange light. "They hunt like wolves," he muttered. "Close. The circle. Starve the prey. They will not strike until they smell weakness." Eli adjusted the bandage on his side, pain stiffening his movements. "You're saying they'll wait until we've run out of strength?" Coda nodded once, his jaw hard. "Yes, and you are already bleeding." The cowboy swallowed. His wound pulsed with each heartbeat, but his pride made him lift his chin. "Don't bury me yet. I've seen worse and kept ridden." But even as he said it, he could feel the truth biting. His body was slowing, and in the desert, slowing meant dying. The fire popped. Sparks drifted upward, swallowed by the black sky. Coda suddenly rose, scanning the horizon with a hawk's sharp gaze. Eli followed his stare. At first he saw nothing, but endless dark, then a flicker, a shadow against the starlight. A man on horseback, still as a post, watching from the ridge. "They've found us," Coda whispered. Eli's hand went to his revolver, but Coda laid a hand over it. "No shots, not yet. Gunfire carries far." The figure on the ridge turned, disappearing into the night as if swallowed by the earth itself. The fire between them seemed suddenly like a beacon for every cutthroat. Within 20 miles. Without another word, Coda kicked sand over the flames, plunging them into darkness. They packed what little they had and moved under the cover of night. Eli's breath came ragged, and his boots scraped against stone. Coda set the pace fast, silent, relentless. The desert stretched ahead like a black sea, dunes rolling under the moonlight. Hours later, when Eli thought his legs would fold beneath him, Coda signaled for a halt in a dry arroyo. They crouched against the sandy wall, breathing heavy. "They're too many," Eli rasped. "We can't keep outrunning them." Coda's expression was grim but steady. "Then we changed the hunt." The warrior picked up a small stone, rolling it between his fingers. A hunter knows his prey's path. But if the prey turns, if it bares its teeth. He tossed the stone away. Then the hunter must decide if the chase is worth his life. Eli almost smiled despite the pain. "So we stopped running. We set a trap." Coda's eyes glinted. "Yes, but the bait must bleed." For a heartbeat, Eli thought Coda meant him, and maybe he did. His wound already marked him as weak as a lure. He clenched his jaw. If dying meant ending the chase, he'd make peace with it. But Coda shook his head. "Not yet. We strike first. In the canyons north, the rocks echo. A shot there sounds like thunder. Horses will spook. Men will stumble." Eli pictured it. Shadows, echoes, chaos. A slim chance, but a chance nonetheless. "Reckon we can make it that far?" Coda looked at him steadily. "We must. Or we die with sand in our mouths tonight." The decision was made. They rose again, heading north. Behind them, faint as whispers, came the sound of riders' hooves crunching, low whistles. The hunters tightening their circle. The desert hunt had become a war of wills. And dawn would decide who lived to see the sun. The first light of dawn crept over the desert, painting the cliffs in streaks of crimson and gold. Eli and Coda had reached the canyons north, their bodies battered, but their spirits sharp with the fire of survival. The jagged rocks loomed like broken teeth, casting deep shadows where men could hide or spring an ambush. Coda crouched low on a ledge, scanning the horizon. The faint drumming of hooves carried through the still morning air. The hunters were close now, their circle drawing tight like a noose. "This is where it ends," Coda said quietly, his voice calm as stone. Eli checked his revolver. 6 bullets. That was all he had. His fingers trembled from blood loss, but his jaw set with a stubbornness only a cowboy could carry. "Then let's make it count." They moved quickly, positioning themselves among the rocks. Coda had chosen well. The canyon funneled the riders into a narrow path where sound would bounce and echoes would multiply. It was a place meant for chaos. Moments later, the first wave appeared, dust rising, horses snorting, a dozen riders with rifles gleaming in the morning light. Their leader, a scar-faced man with a red bandana, rode at the front, eyes scanning for any sign of their prey. Coda lifted his bow, the string drawn back to his ear. He loosed the arrow, and the shaft sang through the air, striking the leader's horse in the flank. The animal screamed, reared, and toppled sideways. Throwing its rider into the dust in the same breath, Eli fired his revolver into the canyon. Wall! The gunshot boomed like thunder, the echo rolling back and forth until it sounded as if an army had opened fire. Horses panicked, whinnying and thrashing, throwing men from saddles. Dust turned the canyon into a storm of confusion. Now! Coda shouted. They struck from the shadows. Arrows and bullets flew. One rider fell clutching his chest. Another toppled under his horse's hooves. Eli's revolver barked again, and again until the barrel smoked hot in his hand. He hit 2 men, missed another, then swung the butt of the gun into the face of one who charged too close. But the hunters were many. They regrouped, their leader roaring orders as he pulled himself. Back into the saddle. Gunfire cracked, ricocheting off stone. A bullet grazed Eli's shoulder, spinning him against the rock. He hissed in pain, vision blurring. Coda moved like a spirit of war. His long hair whipped in the wind, his chest bare but painted with streaks of dust and blood. He leapt from one ledge to another, loosing arrows with deadly precision. 3. Riders fell before they could even aim at him. Still, the tide was heavy. More riders poured into the canyon, rage in their eyes. The red bandana leader pointed his rifle at Eli, who was struggling to reload with bloody hands. The crack of a rifle split the air, but it was not the leader's. From the ridge above, a shot rang out, and the man toppled from his horse, dead before he hit the dirt. Eli blinked in shock. More gunfire followed, but it was aimed at the hunters. Shadows appeared on the canyon walls, figures moving fast, rifles flashing. Coda's people. Warriors of his tribe, summoned by the smoke signals he had left along their trail during the night. The hunters, now caught between the thunder of echoes and a rain of arrows from above, broke. Horses screamed, men shouted, some fled down the canyon as fast as they could spur their mounts. Others fell in the dust, swallowed by the chaos. When the last echoes faded, silence reclaimed the canyon. Bodies lay scattered. The hunters were no more. Eli staggered, clutching his wound. Coda caught him before he could fall, steadying him with a firm grip. You fight like a caged wolf, Coda said softly, almost with respect, and you fight. Like the storm itself, Eli rasped, his lips curling into the faintest smile. Above them, the warriors of Coda's tribe descended, nodding to their brother with solemn pride. One offered Eli water, another pressed herbs to his wound. For the first time since his chains had been broken in the desert, Eli felt something that had been missing from his life: belonging. Coda looked at him, eyes steady. The hunt is over, but your story, it begins again. The rising sun poured. Golden light across the canyon, painting the 2 men cowboy and warrior-like figures carved into the land itself. They had faced death, and in the heart of the desert, they had claimed life instead. And though Eli did not yet know where the trail ahead would lead, he knew this. By freeing the warrior, he had not only unleashed a deadly hunt, he had found a brother in the fire of battle. The desert wind carried their silence, and the land kept their secret.